Today's guest co-wrote this incredible book, a Summit Series summary, 50 years later, a must-read. It is called When Canada Shut Down. We're sorry, the country you're trying to reach is watching hockey. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show. Coming up! Welcome to the program. Great to have you here today. Very exciting program for you. We're talking about the 72 Summit Series. And let me introduce you our guests. First of all, he grew up in Georgetown, played baseball and hockey, now lives in North Carolina. He founded the Expat Group, organized the first Terry Fox run in North Carolina, author and historian, author of The Goal That United Canada, and had just released a new book, which we're going to talk about today in just a moment. Also joining us, he was born in Moldova, raised in Cold War Soviet Union, big hockey fan, immigrated to Florida as a young man, started organizing international tournaments for youth, introduced Russian Heritage Night, started master classes in various cities hosted by Darius Kasparaitis, Alexei Podakarovsky, Valerie Bure, and Michael Grabowski in Toronto. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program, Sean Mitton and Alex Braverman. Guys, good to have you here.
Joe, great to be here.
It's good to see you.
Now, we would have had Paul Pascu too, because he's co-author of this book as well, but Paul has got some family, some tough family stuff that he's going through, and we just want to actually send our thoughts and prayers out to Paul and his family who are going through a difficult time right now. But thank you guys for being here, and we want to talk about what you guys have in common, which is you co-wrote the book, When Canada Shut Down. We're sorry. The country you are watching the country you're trying to reach is watching hockey. Great book. I just finished reading it. It's awesome. This is the consummate book on the Summit Series, the 50th anniversary. When Canada shut down. First of all, Alex, I want to ask you, how and when did you get out of the Soviet Union?
Oh, it was back in 1989, before the Soviet Union collapsed. It was a long journey. We left. My parents lived in Moldavia at that point. I lived in Ukraine. We took a bus basically from Moldavia to Ukraine, and then through Czech Republic. At that point, it was Czechoslovakia, to Austria. We stayed in Austria for 20 days, and in Italy for 5 months, and end up in Florida. By chance. I mean, we never planned for that, but it just happened.
So that was quite a journey. That sounds like a book in itself. When you're looking back at what happened, where you are today, and everything else, are you pretty happy that you were able to make your way out of there?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I started the family here. I got 2 kids now. My son actually played hockey in Florida for Junior Panthers, and that's how I got involved more in hockey, as a hockey parent, and it just grew a little bit to different location. I mean, different directions.
Now, Sean, the way I understand it, you're kind of the ringleader here when it comes to this book. Talk about cutting this book down from, a collection of somewhere around 200 stories to 72. Was that a difficult process for you?
Yeah, so there was a couple of different books. First, the 40th anniversary book was more of Canadian nostalgia, and it was called The Goal That United Canada. And so with Paul Pascu and Alex, we had 72 stories that we basically cut down. We probably had about 90. So the hard thing was, as we went through in the process, we would get new stories, and another good story would get kind of bumped out at the end. So it was quite a process, and even right to the last month, there was really interesting, compelling stories. Ann Peel, for example, was a Canadian who was in Moscow. She was actually the last story in the book. So kudos to Alex for helping find her.
Well, you mentioned Ann Peel, and I was going to bring it up a little bit later on, but we have that interview. Paul has provided us with that interview with Ann Peel. If you can play that for us, Victor, that would be great.
Hi, what's your name?
NPO.
Now, you've got Moscow and Maple Leafs written across there.
That's the Canadian Embassy hockey team.
Now, do you live here in Moscow?
Yes.
You're pulling for Canada tonight, though, are you?
Oh, yes.
I heard you making a lot of noise up in the stands.
It's just because I'm happy.
Does your dad work here in Moscow?
Yes, he's in the Canadian Embassy.
I see. Okay, how long have you lived in Moscow?
For 3 weeks.
You've just come over here.
Yes.
Some of these people have lived here almost as long, but I guess you'll be staying a little longer, eh?
Yes, I'll be staying for 2 years.
For goodness sakes, are you looking forward to it?
Not really.
Are you going to learn to speak Russian?
I hope so.
Okay, thank you, dear, and enjoy the hockey games.
All right, Sean, she's wearing a shirt, Moscow Maple Leafs. Tell us about a little bit about Anne's story.
Yeah, just to give people context, one of the things that's unique about our book is Paul Patskow has been basically able to get all the intermissions from game 1 to game 9. And I say game 9 because that's the game in Czechoslovakia and Prague. But essentially, we have all the pregame, the postgame, the intermissions. And so we've basically transcribed some of those really interesting quotes. But for Anne's story, Alex, noticed that her name was Ann Peel. He had reached out to the former ambassador to Moscow, Gary Smith, and then we tracked her down because she was a member of the Ontario Athletics Hall of Fame. And so, we reached out to them and said, listen, would you happen to have Ann's contact information? They did. And within a day, she responded to us, and we had a great interview, a great talk. And the incredible thing, Joe, was in 50 years, she had never seen that video of her with Bill Good Jr. So now she had proof when she tells people that she was interviewed during the Summit Series. She now has that video. So it was a great story.
Yes, and you talked about Athletics Canada. Apparently, Anne was an accomplished race walker. Who'd have thought?
That's exactly right. Yeah, we had no idea, and she was an elite race walker. I think she had mentioned at one point she was top 10 in the world, and
wow.
What a great find and a wonderful lady. And the other funny thing, Joe, is that she's actually on the cover of Ken Dryden's 50th book as well. So we can say that we've interviewed the lady who's on front of Dryden's cover.
What a story! And obviously she was a lifetime hockey fan after that series.
Oh, absolutely.
Sorry, Alex, what were you going to say?
And she did learn some Russian too, because when we interviewed her, she answered back in Russian sometimes.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, well, she was there for a while, I suppose.
If I could just share one of her stories that's in the book, and again, I mentioned she was the last story. She attended games 5, 6, and 7, with some people from the embassy. And for game 8, they didn't have an additional ticket, so her and her brother watched the game at home. And so, you can imagine the build-up in the third period, and of course, the Henderson goal. And at that time, her screen went blank, basically black. And so she saw the stick movement, but she had no idea that Henderson scored. And so her and her brother had to wait for her parents to come home to find out what happened and what was the outcome of the game. And then they had another post-game celebration. So what a unique experience.
Yeah, that was kind of weird how that magically the feed just disappeared when Canada scored that winning goal in Moscow, and nobody in Moscow got a chance to see it. They've seen enough of that. Okay, shut that down.
That's right.
Well, some great stories. Obviously, Paul Henderson has a lot to do with this book. He was clearly the star of the show, scoring the winners in game 6, 7, and 8, and a couple of beauties included. Paul talks about how that game-winning goal in game 8 wasn't such a beauty, and the way it's called, he falls. Henderson slips and falls and everything else. But that goal right there in game 6, that was a nice slap shot. Then in game 7, the end-to-end rush, Henderson scored some absolutely beautiful goals. He was an incredible player, and and I'm among those folks that feel that Paul should certainly be in the Hall of Fame. We're going to get to that a little more, but here's Paul Henderson again beating 4 Russians, and then Vladislav Tretiak, possibly the greatest goalie of all time. Just an incredible performance by Henderson in this series, and of course the game winner in game 8. Also interviewed Walter Gretzky, Don Cherry, Daryl Sittler, Howie Meeker, Johnny Bauer. The book also included, Canadian entertainers, media, government officials. It was great to see some quotes in there from my old buddy Pat Marston, who hired me, by the way.
Oh, wow.
This was a real fun book for me to read, and I have to be honest with you. A couple of times in here, the romance in there, brought a tear to my eye. And Alex, I want to talk to you a little bit about the stick boy, Alexei Kochetkov, the Russian stick boy.
Yeah, he was wonderful contact. I met him through mutual friends, and during our work on the book, he was very helpful, connecting us to different people. He was actually he was backup goalie for Tretiak at one point when he was 12 years old or 10 years old, and he was 12 and Tretiak was 10. He play up, Tretiak play up, and they were at the same team at the same time together, so they become friends there. Alexei had some ice problems, so he didn't go too far. He just finished his player career as in a student league or youth hockey, but they keep friendship through the years, and Alexei was instrumental to connect us to Vladislav Tretiak, which eventually helped us to have another story. We connect Paul Henderson grandson and Tretiak grandson together, and we interview them both, and they had a chance to meet each other and talk about hockey in different countries and different leagues they play in. Max Tretiak is playing for KHL right now, Club Sochi, but he was curious about student leagues here in Canada, and it was another story to read.
Yes, it was good. It was pretty cool, because Henderson's grandson, I think, plays at Canisius College. Tretiak's grandson, as you mentioned, plays in the KHL. He's big, even bigger than his grandfather was. So covers a lot of net. Pretty good goaltender.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely. And the other instinct. Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Go ahead.
No, it's fine.
Go ahead, Sean.
He's a good,
what I was just going to say
goaltender.
is years ago in the KHL, that Max Tretiak was the backup to Ilya Sorokin, who's one of the top-notch goalies in the NHL right now for the Islanders. So, he's already had some incredible experiences, and I think Max is like 6'4", 220. He's a big kid.
Yes, he is for sure. I saw that in the book. So, how difficult was it to put together all these interviews, and what was the process for this, Sean?
We have some technical issues.
Go ahead, Alex.
I'm sorry. If you're talking about Russians part of the interviews, we have some technical
Well, sure.
issues.
Okay, let's go there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, some players older and they don't use the technology, and thanks for God for technology, for Zoom and other programs. We were still able to connect it with them, and we interview Tretiak, Mikhailov, Yakushev at the same time. We interview other players and children of the players. So it was, great. We were able to do that.
Okay, now Sean, you were starting to talk there about the process for putting this all together.
Yeah, it was a great team with Alex and Paul and myself. And so the first part is we really started out with an outline to say, what did we want to do? How did we want to cover the series, basically from the contract signing, but also including giving some context about how the Russians were dominating, back in the 60s and 70s, and then tying in the 8-game recaps and including stories that supported the games all the way through. And so, with Paul being an incredible hockey historian that had access to a lot of video, a lot of different stories, Alex and I supporting on interviews of both on the Canadian side and on the Soviet side, we really wanted to give a real diverse perspective. And of course, these days with, people's attention spans, if you will, on the internet, we wanted to have 72 shorter stories so that people can kind of pick up the book, read a number of stories and put it down and really have some different perspectives on things that they hadn't considered before. And so I think we accomplished that. And, we are also fortunate to have Paul Henderson and Tretiak write the foreword for the book. So that was one of our goals at the beginning, was to have the 2 stars. And once they understood what our goal was, and sharing stories with younger generations, they were absolutely on board with it and very supportive of our book project.
Yeah, I think it's hard for young people today to understand the context here and what was happening politically and everything else. Now we got some video here of Red Square, I believe that if you can find that. Yeah, I believe that's a Bobby Orr sighting. Tell us about this. Yeah, like as you
Yeah.
mentioned, Paul having all this access to incredible video, the greatest video library of anybody when it comes to hockey.
Yeah,
And
it's really unbelievable. And just looking at some of the players here, Eddie Johnson, Henderson walked by in his great checkered pants. There's Weddy Stapleton in the backgrounds, Ken Dryden and Don Orey. I see Mickey Redmond and Harry Sinden. Denny Brodeur, who's right there just walking past, the father of Martin Brodeur. He was the photographer, one of the photographers in the series. Dale Talon just walked by. But Paul Patskow obtained this video from Red Berenson. And Red was one of the players in the series. And of course, back then he played for the Blues, and also known as one of the best college hockey coaches in history. But what a
Right.
wonderful little piece of history of seeing these guys just walk around Red Square.
Yeah, that was so cool. It's interesting that Randy Gregg was in Moscow as a fan. Him and I think his brother went there. And he did. I had Randy on the show a while back, and he mentioned this at that time too. He really wasn't happy with Alan Eagleson's behavior. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, first of all, it was a surprise to find out that Randy was one of the 3,000 Canadians over there. So we were very fortunate to find him and interview him. And, for him, context-wise, he was 17 years old. He went with his brother, who kind of dragged him over. And he might have been one of the youngest Canadians in that group. So he was just about to attend university. And, he delayed his university career by 2 or 3 weeks to go to the games. But you're absolutely right. One of the comments that he made was that he was very disappointed how some of the Canadians behaved, specifically Alan Eagleson, and some of the things that happened on the ice that maybe weren't really Canadian-like. And so Randy's always been a guy who plays the right way, he acts the right way. Today he's a physician, he serves people well. But he was a great person to interview, and I think he gave a really honest perspective of the good things he saw in Russia, but also some of the things that we could have done better.
What was Al Eagleson's role in all of this? Because it was kind of confusing.
Yeah, one of the interesting stories that we wrote is called how the story was a great inconvenience. And the story is actually an interview in Game 3 in Winnipeg with the president of the NHL, Clarence Campbell. And if you take a step back and say, how did all this get put together? The contract in Prague, Czechoslovakia was signed by Hockey Canada, the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association, and of course you had to have sign-in by the NHL and the NHLPA. Additionally, if you look back in the summer 1972, there was 2 expansion teams who came in, which was the Atlanta Flames, the New York Islanders, and also the WHA was starting up, which meant they took some of the players from the NHL, like Bobby Hull and Jerry Cheevers. So in terms of hockey history, it was a really wild time. There was just a lot of stuff going on. But Alan Eagleson was the one who essentially organized putting this series together, the financial aspects of it, dealing with getting the TV rights, setting up additional games, which were also moneymakers, 2 games in Sweden between the Canada and Moscow side, and then the game in Czechoslovakia as well. And, even though that Eagleson was certainly played the role of the bad guy by swindling some money from the players at the end of it, which is certainly terrible. I don't know that the series would have come together if it wasn't for Eagleson putting all this with the Russians. I mean, think back then, there was no internet, there was language issues, there was time barriers. So 2 countries who didn't necessarily know each other very well. I don't want to say that they liked each other, but the fact that he was able to pull all this together, to me, is just a project management miracle. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I guess you say 2 countries that didn't know each other, probably didn't like each other much then. But today, I mean, recently in the 50th anniversary, the Canadian players were honored at Parliament Hill. They've been fed at everywhere, and we had the alumni lunch, and Paul was there, and some of the 3,000. We're going to get to that in a bit, but and of course the Russians held their own celebration in Moscow. We got a couple of photos from that. So so tell us, how big a deal was it for what did this do for international relations between Canada and Russia? And maybe Alex, you can start with that one.
Yeah, the picture you just showed was actually from our interview a year ago, and at that time we were hoping for much bigger celebration. We were hoping we talk about that actually at the end of the interview. In 1 year we're going to meet in Russia and Canada and celebrate together. Unfortunately, because of circumstances, it didn't happen. But we tried to contribute something to these celebrations, and we organized a video from Paul Henderson to Russian players, Soviet players, which they used during the celebration in the hockey museum in Moscow. And also the Soviet players in return shoot some videos and answer some questions for us, and send the best regards to Canadian players. So even we are far apart, even we have some differences, but hockey should help us get together, and we're preaching hockey diplomacy, and we hope it will work eventually.
Yeah, I talked to Frank Mahovlich about this, and Ronnie Ellis, and they talked about how a few years back, they went to Russia and they were treated very kindly by Putin and everything else, and they had some sort of like a second idea what Putin was all about, and then now you got what Putin's doing today, and it's just like, wow, it's just it's really hard to figure this out, but and fathom it. But it is, I guess it is what it is, and what can you do about that? But the guy was a hockey fan and everything else, but this stuff that's going on, it's crazy. But anyway, I want to stay away from the political side of things right now. I want to talk about the book more, and interesting. I didn't realize that Harold Ballard had made the trip to Moscow while he was awaiting sentencing for grand theft and tax fraud. So, and you got a story, some stuff about Harold in the book. He left quite an impression.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the nuggets that we kind of found as we went through the process. At that time, he hadn't been the owner of the Leafs that long, but he was being investigated on federal charges of theft and fraud, and so his sentencing was going to come up before the series, but the judge couldn't get his references to be interviewed because all his references were heading to Moscow, so it got delayed. Ballard actually went to Moscow for the 10 days. He got a letter from Alan Eagleson, who was a lawyer, to basically acknowledge and that he would kind of be looked after there, kept an eye on. And we have some really interesting stories in the book about some of the things that Ballard did during those 10 days, from shopping excursions with a great story from Bob Cole to partying in the hotels with the security ladies. And he then came home and had to face his sentencing, which happened, I believe, in October, just after, about a month later. And sure enough, he was sentenced for over a year in the Kingston Penitentiary. So we talk a little bit about the court scenario and Bill Ballard being there, but yeah, it kind of got lost in all the things that were happening with the Summit series. And in fact, we actually have a photo in the book of Harold Ballard sitting with a Team Canada photo, in an unofficial photo, if you will, with him sitting in the middle, but beside Alan Eagleson. So I thought that was kind of a funny image of him at Maple Leaf Gardens with Team Canada.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, something else. No, you and Paul recently hosted a great event at the NHL alumni event at the at Penalty Box. Paul Henderson was there, along with some former other NHLers, and it's cool to see some of the 3,000 fans who went to Moscow in September 1972 to support the Leafs. Those are some other guys that were there, Jerry McNamara. I know Paul and other members of the team said they really got a boost from that Canadian presence in Moscow. Tell us about that.
Yeah, one of the things that we were very fortunate in the book was to interview a number of the attendees. We called them the 3,000 in Moscow. And so at that luncheon, we actually had 11 of the people there. So, it was almost one of the largest mini reunions of Canadians in Moscow that's happened in the 50 years. And they had such a wonderful time, talking with Paul. But you're exactly right that Paul and Frank Mahovlich, Pete Mahovlich, especially in the CBC documentary, expressed how important those 3,000 Canadians were. In Game 5, after they lost a close one, 6-5, the Canadian fans stood and sang "O Canada," and it gave the players so much energy. They really wanted to win for the people of Canada. And, all the way through, they were an inspiration, whether it was walking in the streets of Moscow and giving, positive energy. These people really, they were giving it their all. And, I think they were worn out as much as the players were after those 10 days in Moscow, but it was really a trip of a lifetime. And in interviewing them, they still go to parties and they talk about being in Moscow. And yeah, that's just part of, in some ways, their identity, I think, as they've gone through these 50 years.
Yeah, you should have got them to play Hide the Bugle. I'm going to save that one for the book for people to make sure they read the book to see that one. But no, we got a clip
Sure.
from the event. Paul Henderson talking about not being in the Hall of Fame. And this is cool. You hosted by you and Paul.
And this is the truth. There's a lot of players that are not in the Hall of Fame that have better careers than I am. And it doesn't bother me one iota that I'm not in the Hall of Fame. I've got every other award in the whole confounded world. But that is the truth. They put me in, nobody's going to be upset anymore. Forget it. Kick me out.
So now also we have another clip I want to show you from the alumni lunch. Now Paul talks about the nasty crash that he took into the end boards in Game 5. So lucky he was wearing a helmet, one of only 3 Canadians to wear a helmet. Let's play that clip.
CCM came along that summer and offered me an endorsement deal if I would wear a helmet. And so when they told me what they were going to pay me,
That's great.
and my wife was been on me. She wanted me to keep it on, and I said, "Gosh." So anyway, I go to training camp, and we made a great deal. And anyway, we go to training camp, and Sid Abel, the coach, came to me and says, "Paul, we don't want our players wearing a helmet." And that's how the culture was. And so I said, "Well, Sid, this is where they come along this summer, and this is what they're going to pay me." And you know what he said? Bullshit, they did. And so he said, and so I had to get the contract and show him. And so I said, "Here's the deal. If you think I'm pulling up, not playing well, I'll take the helmet on. But if I'm playing half decent or playing well, I think I should be able to do that." And he said, "Okay, that's a deal." Well, about 5 games later, the New York Rangers came in, and we beat them 5-3. I got 4 goals and an assist. And he come back and he says, "I got no problem with you wearing it." True story. True story.
Obviously, the attitude about helmets has changed since then.
Oh, most definitely. And to Paul's point, in Game 5, if he didn't have a helmet on, he would have been knocked out. He wouldn't have played in Game 6, 7, and 8. Would have been totally different. And that's why one of the stories we called the most valuable helmet.
Right. And Alex, the Russians obviously had no problem with the helmets. They all wore them.
Yeah, as I said, they hate Paul at that time when he scored the 8 goals, but the winning goals in Game 8. But they love him, and now, and they still, friends, and they want to be friends all the time. Yes, but Russian helmets were a little bit different. They were using more like a bicycle helmets, not the regular one.
So I mean, there's no question that if you looked at that tape of him crashing into the boards in Game 5, if you in today's game, there's no way he's passing a concussion protocol after that. There's no way he's playing in any of those games. So there's no way
Not at all.
that this is happening. Here it is, like Henderson breaking in, tripped up, hits the end boards, boom, head first, and he was out. And then he came back in that game and scored in Game 5. Then he scored the game winner in Game 6. He scored the game winner in Game 7, and he scored the game winner in 8, which you referred to in the book as the Paul Henderson hat trick, which has never been done again, as far as I understand.
Right.
Paul's
To the best of my knowledge.
Yeah. One of the funny things that Alexei Kochekov mentioned when he talked about the Team Canada not wearing helmets, he said they look like Hollywood movie stars because their hair was flowing around, they were chewing gum, totally anti-Soviet Union at that time, but they just look like these guys, the Esposito big hair, and they hadn't seen players skate and play like that before.
It was different for sure. Savard had quite a head of hair on him as well. White not so much, but there's there's a few
That's
that
right.
did. Now, how close was Tretiak to becoming a Hab or a Red Wing? Maybe you can speak on this one, Alex.
Actually, today is back in '89. He was inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame. October 3rd, '89. So he was also drafted by Montreal Canadiens. Savard, as a general manager, went to Moscow and tried to negotiate Tretiak coming to Canada. But they told him he can't leave Soviet Union because his father is a general of army and he's a proud son of general. He can't go to overseas. And Tretiak mentioned to us later, his father was military, but not general, and nobody ever mentioned to him this invitation to another team, to Montreal. But luckily for him, he went and to NHL and as a coach, and he coached the great Eddie Belfour, which another story in our book also, and. He did some training camps in Montreal and Toronto. Coaching goalie school in Canada. So I believe he's still loved by people of Canada and NHL fans and fans around the world.
Right, and you talk. He is for sure known in Canada. You talk in the book about Eddie Belfour meeting him. He knew who Tretiak was right away. He's his hero. And that's been the case for a lot of Canadians that who grew up watching that series, and then afterwards, of course, you got a diary in the book, Sean, from Carol Castle. She talks about the lineups, the issues with toilet paper, fascinating stuff. But Alex, you lived it. Tell us about growing up in the Soviet Union with the lineups and for everything.
During the series, I was only 12 years old. I lived in Moldavia, as you mentioned before. It's a small town, 200,000 population. But we watched the series on the black and white TV as everybody else, I guess. But one of the story I can relate to when we interviewed recently Brett Park, and he mentioned during the interview. He told us a story about them sitting after the game in the bus, and Russian kids came over and asked for some, bubble gum or candies. And I had similar stories. Just when Brad Park gave the kid candy or bubble gum, the militiamen came over and tried to take candy away from the boy. And Brett Park came out of the bus and stopped the militiamen to take the candy away from the boy. And just a few months before the series, during the summer, I went to a school trip to St. Petersburg. At that point, it was Leningrad. And I'm standing on the Palace Plaza in front of Hermitage Museum, I noticed my first ever Volkswagen Beetle car. I never saw it before, and I was, curious to see it closer. So I walked to the car. It was a few owners of the car who was just tourists from Finland standing next to it, and I didn't ask anything from them. I just want to see the car close to it. And the moment I came to them, they were start asking me questions. I didn't have a chance to answer the questions because first of all I couldn't understand what they're asking. But the moment I opened my mouth, I got somebody behind took me over. It was a militiaman man who took me in the small closet in the Hermitage Museum. I mean, on the first floor of it, and then I had to spend all my trip in hotel room because I wasn't allowed to talk to foreigners at that point. And that's a true story, which related to Brad Park memory and my memory got together.
Yeah, that is incredible. I think, Sean, what I got from the book and from talking to the players after and everything else is they really got an appreciation for what we have in terms of freedom here in Canada, and and where you are, Alex, in the States as well. But there's 3,000 fans and a whole bunch of players that came home with a lot of gratitude. I'm guessing, right? And probably something you experienced today, Alex, right? But we got it pretty good here, don't we?
I think if you think of the term Canadian pride, that was the series, especially the 3,000 Canadians and the players who went over there. Directly after the Game 8 with the Henderson goal, when they had interviews, whether it was Brad Park or Paul Henderson, they said, we are so proud to be Canadian. We have so much pride to be Canadian. And that was really the first time that I think I had heard those sentiments. John Ferguson said the same thing, Harry Sinden. They really appreciated all the telegrams, the 3,000 Canadians. And, I think they also, because they had experienced a different way of life and how things were in the Soviet Union, they realized that really we have it really good in Canada. And I think they took those ideas and thoughts home with them. That was really remarkable, some of the interviews afterwards that we transcribed, just the emotion and the feeling of being Canadian. That was a big deal.
It was, guys, it's a great book. It's fascinating. I highly recommend it. Here it is. When Canada shut down, we're sorry. The country you're trying to reach is watching hockey. Fascinating stuff. Romance in there. Actually brought a tear to my eye. Great work on the alumni festivities as well, guys. The documentary, amazing stuff all around. Thank you for being on the show and taking the time to join us to talk about this stuff. It's awesome. Must read for sure.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, Joe.
Thank you, guys. And thank you, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks.
Give us a nice perspective there. It was really good. Love the book, by the way. All right.
And people can pick it up online at lulu.com.
Right. Good com. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. lulu.com. All right. All right. Thanks once again for being on the show. We will have more sports when we come back.
More Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show coming up after the break. Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com. Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca. Joe Tilley Sports is brought to you by COSA, Central Ontario Standardbred Association, providing a united voice for harness horse people racing at Ontario tracks. Check out your benefits today at COSAonline.com and check out COSA TV on Facebook and YouTube for all the latest harness news and live action updates. Live racing year-round. Go to HPIBet.com for all your wagering options. Become a member today, and your first bet is free. That's HPIBet.com. Do you know why that happened? You didn't fix your ball mark. The birds around here are very protective of the course, and when people don't take care of it, this is what happens. It's pretty simple. Just find your mark, fix it, and at least one other. Hey, look at the bright side. We're not up on the northern course. They've got bears and moose. Visit moregolf.ca today. You'll find everything a golfer could need, from balls, gloves, and clubs to custom fitting opportunities and training gear. Go to moregolf.ca and get $20 off your first purchase of $100 or more. Just enter the promo code JT Sports. Now, my COSA Swiss pick of the week. Last week, I went with Unique Era in the ninth race at Mohawk. Looked great at the half. Got boxed in along the rail, though, heading into the far turn. Phenom Sealster with Austin Sorey in the buggy. A massive finish at 35-1, trained by Macy Cassell. The 3-4 exact there returned $234. This week, I'm going to Summerside PEI, where they returned to racing again after Hurricane Fiona shut things down. In the 11th race, the feature, I'm taking Moonrider out of post number 5. David Dowling back in the seat of the Colin Johnson trainee. This veteran has won 38 times and $422,000. It's a good horse. The Breeders' Crown is coming to Woodbine Mohawk Park October 28th and 29th. 12 championship races over 2 incredible nights of racing, several $1 million in purses. For all the racing updates, visit COSA TV on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Go to HPIBet.com for your wagering options.
This is the Excellent Sports Adventure, brought to you by Lycom.
Back in the playoffs, baby. You know, I like Charlie Montoyo, but when he was fired, the Jays were 46-42. Since John Schneider took over, well, they won almost twice as many games as they've lost. The offense has been ridiculously good. The pitching has been stellar. Alek Manoah was named Pitcher of the Month for September. They've clinched a playoff spot. They're getting ready to host the Wild Card Series with the Mariners. An eventful week that included Aaron Judge hitting his record-setting home run here, surrendered by Tim Meza.
I feel like we've been attacking him away pretty much a lot of the time, or trying to get away and trying to expand from there. And yeah, just wanted to attack him with sinkers. Wanted to challenge him. Wanted to try to get the ball on the ground, especially with a runner on first. And now he put together a pretty good at bat. Probably made the one mistake, and he took advantage. So kudos to him. Congratulations to him. Yeah, just left one too many pitches over the plate to a really good hitter.
That he is. By the way, for the guy who had a chance to catch that homer, dude, you dropped the ball. Seriously. Well, the Argos pride themselves on being a great defensive team, but they were definitely schooled on D against a fired-up Stampeders club in Calgary. Just a few days after signing a contract extension, Jake Meyer gets the Stamps rolling, finds Reggie Bagleton, who fights his way in for 6. After putting 45 points up against Ottawa last week, McLeod Bethel Thompson couldn't get anything going on this one. Picked off twice. This one by Cameron Judge, the ex-Argo, an 81-yard pick 6. Calgary rumps 29-2. The Boatmen also lost linebacker Whit McManus and rush end Shane Ray to injuries. Those are tough guys to replace, folks. Don't look now, but here come the Alouettes. Trevor Harris lays up a lovely ball for Eugene Lewis, who's got himself a touchdown. Elks up by 1 late, looking to salt it away, but Taylor Cornelius' pass is tipped by Adarius Pickett, intercepted by Tyrese Beverett. Beverett will take this all the way, 100 yards to the house. The Owls win for the 6th time in 7 games, 25-18. They're 2 points behind the Argos. The Elks lose their 15th straight home game. That is a CFL record. Drastic times for the Ottawa Redblacks, calling for drastic measures, I guess. They sacked head coach Paul LaPolice after a couple terrible losses. They're 6-22 since the pandemic started and will miss the playoffs this season. Oh, Maple Leafs are getting ready for their season opener against Montreal, October 12th in Montreal. Nick Robertson is looking to earn a top 6 spot in the lineup. Looking good so far. Takes the feed in the high slot, and he wires it. Then it's Robertson again. Regains control in the zone. Snaps home his second of the night. Nick the Stick has rebounded nicely from that last injury. Willie Nylander is looking good. At least enjoying a solid preseason so far. Well, the Raptors opened their preseason slate in Edmonton against the Utah Jazz. In Edmonton, where Edmonton native Matt Kallio recently became the NBA's first full-time international official. Raps forced the turnover. Here's another Canadian. Toronto's Delano Banton is going to convert. He had 9 points. Chris Boucher, another Canadian, had 11 points and 10 boards. The Reps held Utah to 32 points in the second half on their way to a 114-82 romp. Let's hear it from Mackenzie Hughes, the 31-year-old from Dundas, Ontario, knocked off Austrian Sepp Straka in a 2-hole playoff to capture the Sanderson Farms Championship. It was Mac's second PGA Tour win, first in 6 years. I got a chance to play with this guy a few years back. He's terrific in every aspect. Denis Shapovalov came oh so close to capturing the Korean Open. The 23-year-old from Toronto made it all the way to the final before a 6-4, 7-6 loss to Japan's Yoshihito Nishioka. Great tournament by the Canadian. Some scintillating golf shots were produced at the Captain's Cup at Windance, but despite personal victory, it was a disappointing team loss.
God damn it.
4! Captain's Cup. Team Agnew versus Team Turnbull. There's John Modesta with a shot that rolls up onto the green. He'll be very happy with that. Putting for birdie. Too close to call. Look at that. That team gets steak. This team, it's wieners and beans. What the hell? That's just not fair. It's just not fair.
Yes, and that pudding cup did not stack up well against the chocolate cheesecake that Team Agnew got to eat.
Today's environmental tip: keep your drinks in reusable containers. Instead of buying individually packaged drinks, consider buying a bulk container for your favorite beverage. And buy a reusable bottle. Not only will this help the environment, but it will also help you save money.
Rycom, passionate people who turn complicated business problems into simplified technology solutions for public and private sector real estate, properties, portfolios, and enterprise customers. Optimize and future-proof smart buildings from the ground up. The latest in fault locating, base building network design, managed services, cybersecurity, data analytics. Our fault detection will support all smart strategies, define projected outcomes for capital planning, and reduce environmental impact. Rycom, smart protection solutions. At Rycom, we're building a path to a smart and environmentally friendly future.
Okay, we want to thank all the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great folks. We highly recommend them all. A reminder, the show is available on iTunes, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, and Pocket Cast, as well as the Spanglish Network and Zingo TV and Buzz TV Live. Also, if you really want to check out our YouTube channel, there are past shows, weekly sportscasts, all kinds of cool segments. Like and subscribe. It's free. Thanks once again to Sean Mitton for being on the show, along with Alex Braverman. We want to thank you for watching. Join us next week when Glenn Healy drops by. We'll see you then.
Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show is brought to you by Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in the early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. Let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678. Do you want to buy or sell a home? Could 31 years of real estate experience help you? Why not speak to an amazing team that loves to overpromise and overdeliver? Aldo has a tremendous team of experts on staff. They are committed to making your next real estate transaction smooth and comfortable. Call 416-GET-ALDO or visit getaldo.com. MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more. Hi, I'm Joe Tilley. This November, join me and my wife Penny Claire for a trip of a lifetime. 2 weeks in Egypt and Jordan. Imagine yourself riding a camel beside the Great Pyramids, cruising the Nile River, viewing the temples at Abu Simbel, exploring the desert at Wadi Rum, visiting the ancient city of Petra, and swimming in the world-renowned Dead Sea. Only $41.99 all-inclusive with direct flight from Toronto, free upgrade to 5-star hotels, and the cruise. Visit triphopper.com and book today to get an extra $100 room bonus credit. Let's travel.